Today I'm going to beat Fire Emblem Three Houses, the Silver Snow route, with only Byleth being a usable unit. And that means that only Byleth can ever partake in combat, except for certain exceptions with units that I don't control. I'll explain that later. And this also means that I can't just simply send my units off to death and kill them just so I don't have to ever worry about them. No. No units other than Byleth are allowed to ever partake in combat. So the maps where I'm forced to have more than just Byleth, they have to play dance and avoid getting hit by any of the enemy units, which can lead to a pretty difficult struggle on certain maps. The other requirements for this challenge, or rules that I'm putting down, is that it must be on a fresh save file, something with no New Game Plus shenanigans whatsoever, though I am allowed to make use of DLC items that I've gotten. I'll explain that better when we get to them. So without further ado, let's get into beating Fire Emblem Three Houses with only Byleth. Starting off with the tutorial map, there really is only one major thing you need to do, and that is to make sure to use a combat art on the first unit to make sure you one-shot them with Byleth so they can't just go and whack Edelgard or Dimitri or Claude. Other than that, it's really just a simple game of don't move the three lords ahead in any way, shape or form, and only move Byleth forward. Eventually Geralt comes in and starts also dealing damage, which is kinda handy. Otherwise, pretty easy. Though we ignore the fact that if RNG wasn't in my favor, Byleth would have been left at 1 health with the boss right in front of her. Whoops. After picking the Black Eagles for the Silver Snow route in part 2, the only route where you're not forced to have a lord in every map in the second half of the game, I also pick up the DLC items. Now this includes various different things such as a bunch of renown, some money and other bits and pieces like that, but the main things that we care about here are the various stats boosts, with the most important being the Sacred Galewind Shoes, which give you movement +1, and the Chalice of Beginnings. The Chalice of the Beginning is a very interesting item, so to speak, and is a very powerful relic, because not only does it decrease any form of effective damage against the unit holding the Chalice of the Beginnings, it also guarantees that you always counterattack pretty much every time, which is very powerful. Ultimately, this would come down to your own personal preference and whether you would actually use the DLC items in a challenge run like this, but because I do want to have that additional movement for a map we'll talk about later, I'm just going to say, yeah, I'm going to use all the DLC items because I'm already grabbing them all for the first place to get one of them. I may as well make use of all of them. This does lead to an interesting question though. Doesn't the Chalice of the Beginnings make this challenge a lot easier? And I would say maybe. It makes it far more time efficient because you do clear out maps a lot quicker than what you would without it, but I ultimately don't feel like that part of it really affects the game too much. It just means you're quicker at doing it. It just requires better management of your own health and damage without it anyway. I don't know. You could have your own personal opinion on that. The most major one though is that with this better crowd control, it does lead to certain maps being easier when it comes to dancing around other units, and for the most part I don't think this matters too much outside of one key map, which we'll talk about when we get to it. Either way, we now roll into the first actual challenge of this challenge. Rivalry of the Houses forces you to make use of Edelgard as one of your units, so you're stuck with both Byleth and Edelgard, which just means that Edelgard's going to do a little bit of dancing, especially in the earlier part of this map, just to make sure that she never gets involved in any form of combat. So ultimately we use Byleth to draw both the attention of both Ash and Luwen's towards my general direction to make sure that they go after me and then don't hunt down Edelgard. Unfortunately, I don't successfully drag Ash initially, but I do manage to catch him and deal with him before he does finally target Edelgard properly, but it is a bit of a cautious thing to do there. Anyway, after killing out the 3 units here, I then move up to the bush near Dimitri. This then triggers both Dimitri and Claude to start moving towards Byleth, which is something also very important because you don't want to leave Claude untriggered for too long because he will eventually go and hunt down Edelgard on his own terms. So by triggering him and making him come towards Byleth's direction means that Edelgard can now just sit in the corner for the rest of this map. What ends up happening here is just I sit in the bush, taking hits for a majority of it and just praying that RNG works favorably for me so I don't just randomly die because either a crit goes through from one of the other units or they hit more than I do and they hit enough to just wipe me in one turn. Just continuous healing and stuff like that is really all I can do here as I wait out RNG to give me favorable results. When I'm left with just Claude, I then move to the center bush of this 4-bush setup to force Claude to leave the bushes so he's just basically insta-killed the next time he tries to attack me. Other than that, it's just dealing with Professor Hanuman in the top corner there on his little healing pad, and then it's done. On our second free day, we get forced to do battle, which is what I was going to do anyway. We just kind of grind out the first map, just letting everyone whack Byleth a fair bit just to max out classes. We max out the Meridian class in this battle here, and we also move over to the Fighter class prior to the next major chapter. This chapter isn't exactly too difficult, it purely is just be very slow and patient about moving forward just to make sure that any of the units from the two separate routes will go straight for Byleth, because Byleth is still sitting somewhere in the middle there, and so Edelgard can just sit at the starting spot without needing any problems. This also is made a lot easier considering that at this point Byleth is now significantly ahead in levels to the basic unit, so you're effectively one-shotting or one-turning for the most part. It probably also helped that I got a significant amount of Crest of Flame triggers throughout this entire map, allowing it so that I didn't need to worry about healing too much. It is in the 6th round of Monastery Shenanigans where I actually start working towards the pair of goals that I have. I want to try and recruit as many people from the other classes as I can, well at least ones that I particularly want, which is basically all the women, because I'm weird like that. Don't question these things. I don't know, I like these characters a lot from my way too many times playing this game over, as well as working our way to gain the stats required in order to become a Wyvern Rider or a Pegasus Knight, whichever one ends up being the easier one to gun to when we unlock them. Either way, we now jump to the Magdred Ambush. This is the first of various different chapters that did not require me to have Edelgard, so I only have Byleth, which makes this kind of an easy map to deal with, especially considering that Catherine also exists and will just slice through a bunch of enemies on her own accord that I have absolutely no control over. Though ultimately when it comes to the end of the map, when there is just Lord Lelanto left, Catherine will never actually engage him directly, which is quite interesting and will require Byleth to do the final kill themselves. Ultimately, not too difficult, it was just pace yourself correctly, be wary of the various enemies in the fog, and just don't be stupid. I don't know. But again, Byleth is so far ahead in levels at this point where they're not really doing particularly much damage unless you get really unlucky with a bunch of Gambit RNGs and crits. Your allies do not suffer heavy losses, so you earn a reward from the Treasure Source. I mean, it's more I didn't suffer any losses because it is just Byleth, only Byleth, always Byleth. Jumping to the Goddess's Rite of Rebirth, where we have the assault there, I decided to say screw it for my first attempt and just bum rush straight to the Mysterious Mage. We first take on the Dark Knight and I somehow win the fight on 1 HP. Then I bum rush towards the Mysterious Mage, trying to not get screwed by the various different battle lines that we'll come across when heading there, and then fought the Mysterious Mage, living at 2 HP. A lot of things could have gone very wrong there, and I just got really lucky about this entire one. But we take those lucks, purely because you kind of have to bum rush this one anyway. You only have a short amount of turns before everything goes wrong anyway, especially because eventually people will appear behind you, and it makes it a lot harder to keep Edelgard out of the way, and then also you do have a turn limit of roughly 20 turns, so again, not a favorable map, so just bum rushing is really the best option, and pray you don't get unlucky. Well, that just happened. That was a lot easier than I expected. Granted, we got so lucky on the Death Knight. On the 2 misses, we didn't miss more than twice, so we're fine. Next we jump to Tower of Black Winds with the Canard Tower Bandit Hunt, where we have to hunt down Miklan and get the lance back from him. Ultimately, this chapter is very interesting. Fortunately, we don't have to take Edelgard with us, so we only have Byleth being. We don't have to need to worry about any form of dancing units around to make sure they never get into battle, because that would be very difficult with this map, especially how the units have a tendency to come from behind you. You also want to take this one quite slowly, because you go too fast, you'll find yourself very quickly overwhelmed that not even an over-leveled Byleth with a Chalice of Beginnings can really help you out in those scenarios, because a lot of them have battle lines, which means you can't counterattack, and yes, the hit rates might be low, but you will always get unlucky enough to have at least 1, maybe 2 of them hit in a row and screw you entirely. Of course, Gilbert quickly dies at the back end of the map after holding the back line of enemies for a little while, so yeah, that's expected at this point. He only holds them out for so long. Fortunately, RNG can be lucky enough and he stays alive for a little bit longer, but there's really only so much one can do against consistent battle line attempts. Anyway, I do eventually make my way to Miklard and take an attempt at him. Unfortunately, I died to this attempt because RNG says no, and so I decide to just not go at him just yet and wait out the rest of the enemies on the map to slowly approach Byleth, killing all of them before I finally take on Miklard again. This one was more just pull him my direction first because now I have battle line advantage at this point, which means if my battle line replenish is below half, I always attack first whenever an enemy attacks me, which is super useful. Surprised to see him go for the gambit twice, and I'm still surprised he hit in the first place. Then we'll jump into the next section of this chapter, where we now have a demonic beast that we have to fight, and ultimately this is just Kite the Beast. It's all I can really say here. Make use of the chalice of the beginnings in order to get those counterattacks, whilst also continuously running away to heal to make sure we don't trigger the AoE attack from the demonic beast as well. Because you trigger that, you can't attack back. That is usually free damage, at least in the early game, and also usually some bad status effects that can really screw you. So it's just more Kite the Beast until you eventually kill him. The Iron Sword broke. Aww. I'm curious, how many broken weapons am I going to have in my inventory at the end of this run? 36 turns, not bad, not bad. Chapter 6, Rumors of a Reaper. This is a very simple chapter to really consider. You just solve the investigation in the monastery, burn your monastery free time for the day, and then jump right into the final battle. Skipping over any of the free time that you have for the month, which is totally not a bad decision on my behalf because I totally didn't cut it very, very close when it comes to the required stats I need for certain classes later on in this part, but we don't worry about that. This map is quite interesting as there are two different routes you could take. You can either go to the right side using the teleportation portals and go through and collect a bunch of neat items to eventually turn up in the middle section just above the Death Knight, or you can go to the right, go through the main pathway to approach the Death Knight himself, which I personally went the left route more because it spends a lot of time and a lot of turns to run through all the teleportations, as well as just the bunch of things that will spawn and just be a pain in the ass overall, as well as just battle lines in the middle section were a massive problem when I went through the left route, and I'd assume that it'd be the same case again, especially if your RNG's not that lucky. Speaking of which, I got really unlucky with my RNG. I think I got hit by like 3-4 different battle lines that were low hit rates right in the section before the Death Knight. Fortunately, I didn't die. It was really just heal and hope I didn't die to random battle line shenanigans, but we made it through there. And then I caught up to the Death Knight, which honestly became more of an RNG praying for, because the Death Knight could kill me outright, and it was more just praying for a high critical hit to successfully hit, which we got luckily and ended the map. No, we're not getting in range of him. It's a 100% chance, it won't miss. Hey, we're gonna crit, that's even better. Cool. Next, we have the Battle of Eagle and Lion. I'd personally think this is the first genuine challenge of this run so far. Well, there's a few other maps that do require a bit of thinking, a bit of forefront of idea mapping, and just various different things on these lines, but I personally think that the Battle of Eagle and Lion is the first proper challenge where you really have to think through basically every single action you do up until you finally get to the point where there's like 2 units left on the map for you to deal with, which is usually going to be Claude and Felix, because those are the 2 units that will never move until you get in their range. And as expected, we do also have Edelgard in this map, so she is going to be continuously dancing in the back end of the map to try and stay out of range of things. Unfortunately, in a lot of cases, a lot of units are always moving towards the back end of the map and will eventually get close enough to try and go for Edelgard, so you always have to play around that, and so on and so forth. So let's get into how this went. There are 2 major coordination efforts that you have to actually perform here. So first off, you have to make sure that most of the top end of the golden deer will go towards the blue lions and fight each other on the top end of the map, and mostly wipe each other out for the most part, so you don't have to worry about them too much. Secondly, you have to worry about the 3 Pegasus that are over with the blue lions, because they're going to immediately fly off to your direction, and if you don't deal with them around the turret itself, you kind of have to worry about the fact that they will go straight for Edelgard rather than worry about Byleth. Yeah, they'll take a hit or 2 against Byleth, but they will also always fly towards the direction of Edelgard, and so that's a problem that you're always going to have to keep in your mind. First off, I didn't manage to get Ashe off the turret very quickly and not need to worry about that too much, because that means that Edelgard is more comfortable in the back lane there and not have to worry about the turret hits coming her direction. And then I also jump over to the bush just below the turret itself. First time round I managed to clear the first 2 Pegasus when the third one doesn't quite die, and I decided to just wait in the bush, not do any healing, not try and take out the Pegasus from a distance with a Sword of Creator, because that will consume a lot of the Sword of Creator, because I know I'm about to take a bunch of heat from Hilda and a few of the other Golden Deer units that did come the bottom way, mostly the infantry. But unfortunately that choice wasn't exactly the correct one, and I quickly die from that choice. So instead I do use the Sword of Creator to whack at the Pegasus, the last one out of the sky, and then take heat from Leon and all that from the Horse Brigade coming my direction in the bush, and kill them off as well, burning through a lot of the Sword of Creator uses. After this turn rotation I swap back to a normal sword to finish Leone off, and then stay in that bush for a little bit longer. At this point the Golden Deer and the Blue Lions have started to go after each other in the top end, with Dimitri using one of his battle line uses, which is pretty handy to have, gone. This also attracts the attention of both Hilda and the remaining archer in the bottom section to go after me directly in the bush, but ultimately that wasn't too difficult to deal with. Unfortunately for me, the Blue Lions didn't take as much casualties as I would hope, as well both Marine and Lysithea were focused more on trying to take out Dimitri, which they failed at doing entirely, instead of trying to clear out any of the other units, which kinda sucks, means there's a lot more of them to deal with coming my general direction. Also, unfortunately, they were heading the general direction of Edelgard rather than where I am, meaning that I had to backtrack back down to that bush that I was hanging out in earlier in hopes to grab their attention, and grab their attention I did, to the point where I take Dimitri's battle line to the face and get knocked out of the bush, which ultimately kills me there. That's another Divine Pulse use gone, meaning I only have 2 left. This time around, rather than going straight to the bottom bush, I decided to back off just a little bit to go to the lower bush on the left of the turret themselves, and then move Edelgard closer towards the general direction of being behind Byleth's current location, when in reference to the rest of the units coming towards Edelgard, just to make sure that when they do go towards Edelgard, they first pass by Byleth, and the AI will then target me, because hey, there's a unit they can hit here, let's go for it. Another fortunate thing, Dimitri only gets just barely in range of Byleth, so he still goes for the attack on Byleth, but not be able to go for the battle line because he can't get close enough to use it, so instead uses a spear attack from a distance, which unfortunately, because I have the health to brunt the hit, leads to his fall in this battle, getting rid of what is the second last major problem of the Blue Lions. It's at this point where we're really just left with Claude and his 3 Archer Brigade, which just took out Annette, so they're now active and moving, as well as Dedue, Mercedes, Felix still sitting off in the back lines with, I believe, either a mage or a healer, and one of the other shield people from Blue Lions coming in from the top end. So I just kind of leave them to their own business for a little bit, let them start to fight each other, but once Mercedes comes into range of the archers, I take the opportunity to take out the last Blue Lion shield man, as the archers will go for Mercedes because she's weaker than Byleth, and Dedue will then follow the archers because again they're weaker than Byleth, they're going to target the weakest link first and foremost, and I just kind of bounce between bushes and just wait it out a little bit until both Mercedes and Dedue take care of those 3 archers and then start heading towards my general location. Mercedes does head towards the back end of the map initially, so I just pull Edelgard further into the maps to make sure Mercedes comes by as Byleth first and foremost so I can take her out there, which of course works successfully. I take Mercedes out and basically one shot with a critical that was so unnecessary, but hey, we take those, and then we fight Dimitri, who keeps trying to use battle lines in me when I'm sitting in the bush that are very ineffective because, yeah, you know, that's just how it goes. The luck early with Dimitri hitting and Dedue not is just what we take here. Eventually killing off Dedue, we then move over towards Claude, heal a little bit, and then draw him over to a bush where we just immediately murk him. Then we move over to the last 2 units on the Blue Lions, taking out the No Name and then taking out Felix, finally completing the map. As I said, this one provides more of a challenge than most of the other maps beforehand, and you can tell by how I actually went through the process of pulling apart this map, because it takes a little bit more effort than just simply, okay, we're bum rushing the leader here, the commander, and the map. No, you have to take out everyone here, so you have to do it slowly and patiently and take the right choices, which I didn't initially take for a few of them. I successfully burnt through half of my Divine Pulses, which isn't exactly great to have, but hey, here we are. Ramaya Village is another interesting map. It's not as much of a challenge as the Battle and Eagle map we just had prior to this one. It's just more of a patience map, where you just kind of hang around the first half, making sure to get rid of basically every enemy outside the 2 respawning ones before you move forward to trigger Solon. Because when you do trigger Solon, Geralt now starts moving out of his little bush area, which we kind of want him to stay in because it's a perfectly central position that kind of draws the attention of the two respawning units, and we just kind of hang out there, fight them for a bit, eventually move forward just enough to trigger all of the support units for Solon to start moving forward, but not far enough in that we trigger Solon turning into Solon himself happening, so we only need to worry about the support units which come forward and get wiped, and then dealing with excess backup before we jump into Solon's face, where we trigger him and then we take him out. As I said, this map is more about patience, because if you move forward too quickly, you'll leave Edelgard wide open and you won't be able to stop anyone from hitting her and possibly immediately taking her out, because, you know, she's still only level like 1 at this point. In between Ramaya Village and investigating of the old chapel, I do make an attempt for the Wyvern Rider because I'd finally grinded up enough stats to be even allowed to take the exam. Unfortunately, I failed. One thing that I realized I completely forgot about for at least the earlier part of this game was the fact that I had access to the Pegasus Knight. I mean, heck, that was the reason why I picked female Byleth in the first place, because an earlier flying unit. Unfortunately, by this point it was too late to go and try that, because I'd already grinded up to stats to get the Wyvern Rider unlocked in the first place, and I would need to grind out the Lance for a little while to get the Pegasus Knight unlocked, so I just didn't worry about that at that point. But, you know, that's information that exists. You can get a flying class pretty early if you choose female Byleth and actually grind out both your Lance and flying stats to get the Pegasus Knight earlier, which would make getting to the next 2 flying units that you want to get, both the Wyvern Rider and the Wyvern Lord, a lot easier to do. The Old Chapel, this map is yet another challenge, but not in the same vein as the battle in Eagle Iron was. It is a challenge in its own right, but nowhere near in that way, because not only do you have to juggle Edelgard, which ultimately isn't too difficult with this map, you also have to juggle Geralt's AI, because he can't die in this map, and unlike in previous maps where you've had Geralt just be there as a support unit where the AI just is kind of slow and doesn't do particularly much, this Geralt AI likes to head long first into every single battle he possibly can get himself involved in, even when he's about to die. He just has this need to attack every single time, and I'm pretty sure you can see what problems this ends up causing. Unfortunately for me, I completely forgot about this aspect of this map that requires you to effectively just follow Geralt's every move, because you need to make sure he doesn't get himself killed, so I quickly need to burn through one of my Divine Pulses and take back a lot of turns to completely redo how I was doing this. This time, rather than going off to the Demonic Beast off to the left direction, I decided to just bum rush straight through the middle to get the attention of the 2 Demonic Beasts in the middle and then play Tango with them, whilst Geralt also did somewhat the same, and hope he doesn't take too much damage in this earlier stage, purely because he's going to need it for the next 2 Demonic Beasts that we'll eventually need to deal with. Fortunately, there were a few cases where Geralt AI made the right decision of running further away from the Demonic Beast or jumping into a bush, and actually even got lucky with a crit on one of them, making it easy to deal with those 2. And then on his final hit against one of the Demonic Beasts, he ran off to the top left corner of the map, which puts him far away from either of the 2 Demonic Beasts that we'll inevitably need to face, which gives me more lead time to get them and try to deal with them before Geralt comes in and gets himself killed. Unfortunately, here's the position where I make a decision to pay a little more attention to Edelgard in the bottom of the map, because the bottom left Demonic Beast was starting to make its way towards Edelgard, which leaves the fatal mistake of having Geralt go to the Demonic Beast on the top right before I can do enough damage for it, so he takes some damage here, and then when we do clear that Demonic Beast out, we move over to the next one, and he's in a position where he effectively gets taken out by a Demonic Beast the first time he fights it, which really sucks because it means I have to go back a fair bit with his Divine Pulse. I then only go back a few turns and try to use Edelgard to pull the Demonic Beast in a certain direction away from Geralt's where he's going to end up going. Unfortunately, it doesn't quite do enough, and Geralt still gets slightly enough in range of the Demonic Beast for him to target Geralt, and then dies to it. I then use my Divine Pulse to go back a turn just to try again, see what happens if I broke my rule and let the Demonic Beast go after Edelgard. Unfortunately, this still doesn't save Geralt, as he inevitably dies again, leading to the first game over of this run because I ran out of Divine Pulses. Kind of unfortunate, and I kind of completely forgot about how challenging this map can be, because you really have to try your best to wrangle in that AI Geralt has, which just will go headlong first into any enemy he sees, which is quite problematic. With this newfound knowledge of what I need to do, I decided to finally cave and buy myself a Killing Edge. I've kind of avoided buying any non-normal sword because of how quickly I'll burn through their durability, but I feel like this is the case where I need something that is guaranteed to more likely crit, especially against the pair of demonic beasts that are weak to sword-based attacks, so I don't have to worry about them as much with Geralt. This time around, not only do I bum rush to the central demonic beast, I do it in such a way where I don't bother healing from the damage I take from the first guy in the middle, just so I can try my best to either move the second demonic beast a little closer to the central location, or to kill it before Geralt gets in and draws the attention of the demonic beast in the top left corner. Unfortunately, this choice, when we do end up going for the demonic beast in the top left corner, does lead to me losing Byleth here, burning one of my 3 divine pulses. So instead of running straight forward into the next demonic beast, I decided to hold into a bush and heal for a moment, and luckily enough, the demonic beast targets the student over Geralt. It seems to usually target the student, but sometimes will go for Geralt. Geralt goes in, gets a lucky crit, and then a second hit, and then now the demonic beast is ready to do its splash attack. Unfortunately, this is in a position where both Geralt and the student are in the same splash area, so I now have to burn through my single gambit use in order to draw its attention to Byleth's direction, to make sure that Geralt doesn't take any unnecessary damage here. In the same moment, I've also been pulling Edelgard up to the top end of the map, so the bottom left demonic beast would start heading up the left area and will come towards the general location where both me and Geralt currently are. And with a lucky crit from Geralt, we managed to knock out the third demonic beast just in time for me to set up for the demonic beast coming from the bottom end of the map. The demonic beast takes a hit at Byleth, which then lands a double crit against it, knocking out its first health bar. Geralt doing half its damage and finishing off with Byleth makes very quick work of the fourth demonic beast, leaving us only with 1 more to go, with Geralt roughly at half health. We move over to the last demonic beast, where Geralt stops in a position where I can stop just in front of him, which is also the furthest I can move, to also talk with him. He basically says that, maybe you should have taken control of me too. I wish that would have happened, because this wouldn't be so hard if that was the case.
I would have much appreciated that, because this wouldn't have been as much of a bit.
Anyway, the demonic beast is now in a splash mode, so Geralt goes in for a hit and does a pretty good hit, and I decided to make the bright move of standing right behind Geralt to swing past him with the Sword of the Creator, leaving Geralt and me both in the splash zone, meaning that even though the weakest target is up the top with the student, the demonic beast sees 2 targets it can hit with its splash, so it goes for that, dealing damage to Geralt, which then Geralt goes for the attack and then dies the demonic beast. What a stupid mistake from me. Fortunately, I still had a Divine Pulse left, and all it takes was just to not move directly behind Geralt whilst the demonic beast is in Splash Zone, and he splashes the student instead. Anyway, we move into the next round of turns where we knock down Geralt, takes another hit from the demonic beast, knocking him down to half health. I knock out the rest of that bar. The demonic beast whacks at the student, killing them. Geralt takes 1 more hit, knocking him half health of his last bar, leaving Geralt at 3 health from the demonic beast, and I finish him off. Fortunately, it's all said and done. Was very close though.
I'm going through all this effort to keep Geralt alive just for what's about to happen next. It's because he retreats if he, quote, dies here, and he must be here for this. Oh, that was a pain. Geralt, you keep running in to get yourself killed like that.
Now, with the 50-50 chance of getting the Wyvern right, I decided to take another shot at it, and I failed again. Jeez, what is my luck? It's in this free time here that I decided to make an attempt on the Red Canyon Paralog, and now the reason why I want to do this is because it gives me a bunch of additional Divine Pulse uses. Whilst you can probably ignore this on your average challenge run if you really don't care about the Divine Pulses too much, it just gives you slightly more wiggle room in case you stuff up, you can make a few more mistakes and have a few more undos before you have to fully restart the map. Unfortunately, after spending a good 10, 20, 30 minutes making an attempt on this map, I ultimately just give up and go back and try a different map instead, purely because Byleth and Edelgard are both forced to be on this map. Byleth is up in the top left corner, and Edelgard is in the bottom right corner. Very difficult thing to mess around with, and trying to get Edelgard out of the way of all the beasts that will come at her is very difficult to do, and unfortunately without any form of flying unit it makes it a lot more difficult. It might be possible, I don't know. I ultimately gave up after multiple different attempts because I couldn't make it work for me, so I just put it off for now. I decided to take on the rumored Naptool's paralogue, which is both Ingrid and Dorothea's paralogue that you get a lot earlier in the game that I just haven't made an attempt at until now. And the main reason why I want to do this is because one of the rewards you get for completing this paralogue is a battle line for a flying unit. One of the better ones you get pretty early on in the game, especially considering most of the flying unit battle lines are kind of locked behind an authority level of B or higher, which I don't quite have as of yet, so it'd be useful to get this when I do inevitably become successful at getting the Wyvern Rider class. I was doing pretty well with this map up until the point where I triggered the first ambush with Ingrid in the middle half of the map, and unfortunately the sheer amount of enemies were too much for me to deal with before the units coming in from behind us caught up and then started targeting Dorothea. I do burn through a few Divine Pulses here to try and finagle my way into making this work, but ultimately I just undo to the point from before I triggered the ambush, and here's a little bit of fun information for you if you want to try out this paralogue with a Byleth solo run. Just put Ingrid in the middle of the first lava pool. She's out of reach from every single unit on the map, and just leave her there for the time being, because it's only Ingrid, when Ingrid moves further in the map, is when you trigger any form of ambushes. So what you can do here is take Byleth and Dorothea through the map slowly, taking out any enemies that are in your way, and put Dorothea on the final tile, and then walk all the way back with Byleth, and then trigger the first ambush with Ingrid, then throw her back into the middle of no man's land where she can't be touched, clear out the ambush, and so on and so forth. It makes this map pretty simple when the main problem is just getting Dorothea to the end first and foremost before you start triggering ambushes, because when Dorothea's at the end, no one really goes near her and you don't have to worry about her anymore. It's pretty simple after you really think about it.
My father will need...
Jesus, 28 turns. But yeah, because the major ambush triggers off of Ingrid getting to a certain point in the map, and because Ingrid has flying by default, you can just float her over the lava where she can't be touched by basically anyone, and just escort Dorothea to the end first, deal with the last ambush over there, and she's perfectly fine. Then you can go back to deal with that extra ambush with Ingrid, and yeah, that's...
Rolling into our next piece of free time in the monastery, I take another attempt at the Wyvern Rider class and finally get it this time round, meaning that Byleth can now fly around, which is so ultra important with this run. Now with Byleth as a flying unit, I decided to take another crack at the Red Canyon paralogue, which, let me explain why this is such a difficult paralogue. So first off, as I said earlier, both Byleth and Edelgard are on this map, both in two opposite corners of each other. You need to move Edelgard towards Byleth's general location, but before you can get Edelgard over in the area Byleth is in, you need to clear out the pack of wolves that are in this area. But the moment you do, you trigger the 3 birds and the demonic beast to start moving and getting involved in the fight, as well as spawning another bird and wolf in the back island. Now you can see where this gets quite difficult, because now you have to finagle 4 separate birds to target Byleth as well as the wolves, so you can keep them off Edelgard, which is very difficult to do because the birds move quite fast and have a pretty big range, and you also need to keep in mind that there's a wolf on the back island you also need to catch with your attention. It's kind of difficult, and even with a flying unit, it took a fair bit to finagle this in the correct direction. Also at this point, I now have normal vantage, which means if I'm below half health, I will always attack first when I'm attacked by enemies, giving me a bit more of an advantage to potentially kill them or wipe out through their first health bar before they can deal damage to me, which still wasn't perfect because getting any of the splash hits from the birds means that I can't move for a turn, which then makes it a lot more difficult. I also need to make sure I keep my health low enough that it looks like the wolf could one-shot me, because unfortunately I can't get Edelgard out of the wolf's range directly whilst I'm also dealing with the 4 birds. So I need to keep my health low enough so I'm the more favourable target for the wolf, because it might be able to kill me if it successfully lands a shot, and so on and so forth. And the reason why I felt like I needed a flying unit for this is because I kind of hang out in no man's land between the 2 sections of the map where only flying units can hang out, as it's a great way, it was the best position to attract the attention of all 4 birds and try and finagle the wolf in my general direction. And because I couldn't heal, because I need to make sure I keep the wolf's AI's attention on me personally, it left me in a precarious position where if I did take too many hits from the wolf itself, I will die and have to try again. But I couldn't move Edelgard out of the wolf's range because it'll get into the bird's range temporarily, and because the bird does no damage to Byleth, guess what? They're going to target Edelgard every time. So it was just kind of a try and finagle my way with RNG to make this work in my favor. Then the pair of birds get into splash mode near me, but unfortunately my health is now high enough where I'm no longer the favourable target for the wolf, so now I actually have to burn a gambit to make sure the wolf stays locked in on Byleth. You can see where this is a very problematic map when you're trying to do a solo run, because dancing Edelgard around this mess is flipping difficult. And with one of the birds down, two of them getting ready for a splash attack, the two closest ones that are in range of going for Edelgard, as well as the wolf distracted with Byleth, I was finally able to have the opportunity to get Edelgard out of the range of all the beasts. Because here's a funny thing with the mechanics of the demonic beast and beasts themselves. If they can hit someone with their splash attack, they will go for that splash attack every single time. Even if there's an easier hit, they could go kill something else. No, if they can get a splash attack off because there's something in the range of their splash, they will do that every single time. Basically, a Red Canyon is just a battle of playing with the AIs, making the AI work in your favor, using the AI to your advantage to make sure they target Byleth over Edelgard. Eventually, at this point, because Edelgard's now clear and away from the danger, there's only the 3 birds and the main demonic beasts left, and they're not too difficult to deal with. Psych, now that I cleared out the 3 birds that were remaining, there's now another wolf and bird in the general direction where I was taking Edelgard. It's not too problematic, I just kind of go over there, get them to hit Byleth first because they weren't quite in range of Edelgard, then they both go for their splash attack, which I'm then able to kill off the bird, which leaves a perfect square where I can move Edelgard to where she won't be targeted by either demonic beast or the wolf, giving me the clear runway to finally complete this. We'll ignore the fact that I was basically almost dead, and if it wasn't for the fact that I had Vantage, I definitely would have died here and had to try again. Either way, Red Canyon done, Divine Pulses grabbed, this should make things a little bit more easier to deal with. Cool.
I will get stronger still.
1 health!
Our work is
Wasn't even close. Exactly. Oh. Now we roll into the Sealed Forest. Fortunately, we're not forced to have Edelgard here, so it's just another Byleth adventure, which ultimately isn't too difficult anymore. Again, Byleth is way over leveled. We can just hang around in the forest to draw everyone's attention to my direction, purely because more levels by killing every single unit. We just play around in the forest for a little bit. When the demonic beast gets close enough, we just keep out of its splash range, so on and so forth, until we clear out all the units, kill Krzair, then repeat the process of all the new units that spawn, just hang around in the bushes, draw them my direction, always hit back and never be hit, and then eventually kill Solon. Read that. Its friend's gonna get to me quicker than he will. That's great. I love it. Come to me, my friend. Dun, dun. Crit. We call this crit solo Byleth. Come at me. I'm gonna stand here. Oh, you missed. Why?
predictable.
Man. Scrumdiddlyumptious. Dead. Oh, you're coming. Oh, I see you're on your way. Hey, I got some friends to meet down here. I'm sure you guys will be fine over there, right? We call me the crits in the bush. I didn't crit, but you're dead anyway. Well, he's still coming. Oh no, I'm so scared. Come into the forest with me. It's gonna work so well for you, like it did for your friend. Yeah, at least it isn't. It's another crit. Oh, he's angry. Watch out, he's gonna do something. Just gonna back up one. Come into the forest. Boing. And you're dead. Man. Man, oh man, oh man. Oh man, oh man, oh man. Oh man, oh man, oh man. Hey, Krzair. Oh, I don't quite annihilate Krzair. That makes me sad. My healing spot. Why am I laughing so much?
It seems I've exhausted this topic.
I'm a laughing bitch. I just found that too funny. It's like, no, you don't get that heal tile. Go away. Hey, Solon, how you doing, buddy? Come off your healing
I'm
pad.
terrified by you.
Really? Is that...
Even though an emotion like fear has no place inside me,
So that's why you're wearing the brown pants.
that means you must be eliminated.
Predictable.
Local woman gets gifted the powers of God. Used it to play peekaboo in the woods while giggling manically. It's exactly what's happening. Hey, Solon. Voice crack. I'm in the bush. How do you feel about that?
To think
Dead. That's
that
how
I
you
would
feel.
Lose to Mir. But this is
I have too much fun with that sometimes. With Ash finally recruited into our party, we can now go for the last major paralogue you want to gun for in this run entirely, because you don't need to worry about any of the paralogues in the second half of the game, and that is falling short of heaven. This is probably the most important paralogue of the entire run, purely because of one of the rewards being a movement speeds buff. If you successfully complete this, one of the rewards gives you one additional movement on whatever unit you choose to have. And as I said earlier, and as I established earlier, it is quite important to have this movement speed boost. And also, if you want to do a DLC-less run where you don't use any DLC at all, this is a requirement to complete this paralogue. Why? Because with this and the Wyvern Lord, which is a masterclass, you have just enough movement to do the shenanigans you need to do in a later map, which we'll talk about when we get there. But first, let's talk about this fun map. This paralogue is a fog map. It gets worse. This is also a survival map. All successfully wipe out everyone on the map. So you need to survive 10 turns with Rhea, Catherine, or Ash, and Byleth not dying whatsoever, making this a lot more difficult than what it has to be. And you know how it goes with fog maps. They're not really fog maps because the AI is not affected by it. They always know where you are at all times and can go straight for you, even though you have no clue where they are. So this is the point where I end up breaking one of my rules. Here, originally I did go for the attempt of not having Catherine and Ash get involved whatsoever, but it didn't quite work out. Rhea eventually died, etc, etc, you know where that goes. And ultimately I decided to let Catherine get involved in the fight. More so just to be a second point of go for this person type deal, because technically she is not my unit at this point in time. You can't recruit her in the Black Eagles by this point. You still have another 2 chapters before you are allowed to do that, or 1 chapter. Yeah, sorry, the next chapter is when you can actually do that here. So she's not my unit currently. I technically can control her, so yes, I am breaking my rule here. This is also the only point where I do this because it's kind of the exception to the rule. Because this is a fog map, it is made exceedingly difficult. Fortunately, off to the right there is a lake area, so once you deal with the pair of flying units over there, you can just sit Ash in that corner there and he doesn't really get touched. It's not really too much of a problem as long as you pay enough attention. After some trial and error and some lucky crits from Rhea, we do successfully run through this entire map. So it's not too difficult, it's just more of the whole, it's a fog map where you have 2 units that you can never let get involved in a battle for this type of challenge, and then Rhea to also protect. Ultimately, something's going to have to fold at this point to make it a little bit easier and not very, very difficult. I believe it's probably possible. I'm honestly not quite sure on that one, to be real. I don't know if this would be possible, considering the whole you don't know exactly where the units are. Maybe someone who knows this map like the back of their hand knows exactly where you can put people, where they're not in range of anything, but ultimately it's a very, very difficult map if you want to stick to that challenge without having Catherine get involved. Time for conflict in the Holy Tomb. This again is another mostly easy map to deal with only Byleth, because now you're at the point where you no longer have forced to have any unit with you. It's just Byleth unless you're doing paralogue shenanigans, which at this point we're no longer doing. Probably the only important information that I'll give you here that's required for this map is to not get into Edelgard's range until you can go up and kill her just straight off the bat. Purely because her battle line attack is what she'll go for immediately, and it's a very high chance of hitting. If it hits, it deals about 26 damage, maybe more, maybe less, depending on your own stats at this point in time, and it pretty much guarantees your death because you're definitely going to have to deal with her friends as well at the same moment, whilst you can't move and your stats are temporarily lowered. Just don't get into her range until you can go right up to her face and just take her out then and there. And now we jump to the Battle of Garrick Mark. This is just, again, another simple one, bum rush Edelgard. The longer you take to do this one, the more likely you are to just fail because, well, the church's units get overwhelmed by the sheer volume of units and they make it to the objective. So this is kind of a map where you're just forced to bum rush straight to the commander, which is Edelgard, and you can do this in 3 turns if you have the movement bus on a flying unit and just hang out in the bush when you get close by so you don't get immediately killed. It's not too difficult. Again, just bum rush Edelgard and be done with it. And with that, part 1 is finally complete. Moving into part 2, this is where the fun really begins, and when I mean fun, I mean the next 2 chapters are gonna be hell until you have a walk in the park until you hit the finale. No joke, the challenge quite literally peaks here. Here we jump into Hunting by Daybreak, which has multiple different fun aspects that make this map a piece of shit. First off, you get jumped right into the actual battle itself. You don't get a chance to organize your units, you don't get a chance to organize your weapons, buy new stuff, or anything along those lines, so you better hope you had that all organized before you finish the last chapter of part 1, because you don't get a chance to think about it here. Secondly, not only do you have Seraph to contend with, you also have the rest of the Black Eagles who will slowly appear over the time frame of this map, which is really fun because it gets better. They're in all different corners of the flipping map. I told you, this is where the challenge peaks. It gets stupid for a bit. Fortunately, Bernadetta, Linhardt, and Ferdinand spawn in the top right-hand corner in an area where enemies don't actually go unless you purposely make them go that direction, so those 3 are kind of fine to ignore. It's Petra spawning in the bottom left, and Dorothea and Casper spawning in the top left is where problems lie, because now you have to make sure to clear out most of the enemies in both of these halves within about 2 to 3 turns, or at least draw these enemies to different locations where they're not going to go straight for Casper, Dorothea, or Petra in the various locations. This is a difficult challenge to meet that I completely forgot about the problem of. Attempt 1. So I take Byleth immediately to the central location of this map, hoping to draw basically all the enemies towards Byleth's location and leave Seraph in the back lines. Fortunately, he's a flying unit, so he's much easier to maneuver about and avoid getting into combat, and so now we move into the enemy's turn. Unfortunately, one of the assassins land a battle-lying attack, a gambit attack that had a 25% chance hit rate. Don't worry, it's gonna get worse because somehow 3 of these flipping hits will land over the next 3 damn turns, even though they've all got a 25% chance of hitting, for Christ's sakes. Can you tell I was frustrated by this? Unfortunately, the plan to take Byleth straight to the middle didn't quite work because about a few stragglers from both the bottom left and top left do hang around. Fortunately, the one in the bottom left isn't exactly problematic because they take a while to get to Petra, so you do have the chance to go and deal with them if it wasn't for the fact that I kept getting unlucky with goddamn gambits. Anyway, but unfortunately, the few stragglers that were up in the top left were close enough that they can pretty much go in and immediately hit Casper and Dorothea when they appear on turn 3. So unfortunately, I do fail in this first attempt, but I do keep playing on further just to see where the last 3 will end up spawning. And as I said, they spawn in the top right-hand corner in an area where enemies don't tend to attack as long as you don't draw them in that general location. So those 3 will probably be fine up there. My main problem is going to be worrying about both Casper and Dorothea, as well as Petra, and then making sure Seraph doesn't get involved by just bouncing him back and forth, which is going to lead to a bit of a fun problem solving. I end up formulating the plan that I'll go deal with the bottom left area first, then move up to the top left area, and then go to the top right before heading into the commander to trigger that fun. That's the plan that I come up with first. Let's see how that rolls. Attempt 2. This time around I take Byleth down to the bush in a bottom left area of the map, and I also put Seraph into the bottom left area of the map, which was a pretty big mistake because 3 of the units would end up going for Sedif. Unfortunately, they don't actually hit him, but rather than going towards Byleth's direction, allowing me to easier deal with all of these guys in the bottom left-hand corner, 3 of them go towards Sedif's direction, meaning that I have to move Byleth into a better direction and hope to actually deal with them within the turns necessary in order to be able to go up and deal with the ones that are going to go target Casper and Dorothea. Unfortunately, it doesn't work this time around, so I go right back to the beginning and try again. Attempt 3, I mostly repeat what I did before, taking Byleth to the bush in the little bottom left area that has the most targetable areas for pretty much all the enemies in that general location. Unfortunately, I forget to swap to a sword this time around and still have an axe equipped, which is a problem that will cause issues a little bit in a moment. And at least Seraph in the middle section there to, if anything, draw enemies towards his location, because I can just easily bounce him to the bottom where it's less problematic if I've successfully cleared out everything here. Unfortunately, an archer had a 40% odds on hitting a gambit on me in the bush, so it hits. My luck is so not here today. Attempt 4, I decided to float Byleth just over one of the buildings near the central fork of the actual map here in an attempt to draw everyone upwards, making sure they don't actually end up in bushes, so I'm guaranteed to hit and basically kill almost every single time. I also move Seraph down to the bottom area again, but a little further up, still floating over the wall rather than being on the actual ground. This actually does give me some good leeway because most of the enemies do come towards Byleth. I also pull the middle people down towards Byleth. The only one who doesn't actually come is the brawler in the bottom area, but that's not too problematic because they're not immediately in Petra's range. On turn 2, I decided to shift up to the middle row, which successfully draws the attention of the two swordsmen in the top half of the map, as well as the bowsman, meaning that means I've covered the top half here, and Krzair and Dorothea will be perfectly fine because there's no units that can go directly after them because the ones in the central area are blocked by some form of breakable barrier. I next shift downwards just enough to capture the attention of the brawler in the bottom area of the map, but also hold the attention of the two swordsmen who are still alive in the top section. Successfully draw them to my general location, kill the two swordsmen, being left with only the brawler, mean I can move closer to the collection that are down in the middle section on the bottom area of the map to draw the last of the main annoyances that will be dealt with, and giving Petra Sedef also free reign in that area of the map. This successfully draws the attention of the final two units in the bottom end of the map. I kill one of them, the other one is insistent on using Gambit, so eventually I move towards the middle of the map where I get a very unlucky hit from a Gambit that ultimately ends up getting Byleth killed because, you know, stats get lowered from a Gambit, you can't move, etc, etc. Just unfortunate, really, but I don't need to restart here. I'm in a good position, I just need to be a bit wiser on where I put Byleth next. This time I stay unmounted and head over to the bush in the right hand side that still draws the attention of the assassin that's currently following me, as well as grab some of the enemies from the middle top section so I can start thinning the numbers out. Unfortunately, one of the brawlers decides that the bait of Krzair and Dorothea on the other side of the map are more favorable, so they start heading that direction. Fortunately, it's not too hard to just go and mount again, go over to the central section, knock him out, and then hover over a building to hopefully get myself in a favorable position. Unfortunately, another Gambit lands, which is just kind of annoying at this point, that they've got very low odds for most of them, and it's just annoying that they keep landing, and one of the swordsmen starts heading in towards the direction of Krzair and Dorothea again. Fortunately, another Gambit does not land, so I'm able to jump right over to this guy and try to kill him. Unfortunately, RNG says go screw myself and doesn't hit the shots at all, meaning that he's free to target things. So I have to Divine Pulse and then try and hit him again with something different that has higher odds of landing to successfully kill him. Great. With the final two assassins following Byleth and getting killed by her, I can then move up to the top right hand corner of the map and clear out those enemies just so that's not something to worry about. Finally take on Peladro and then kill him, ending this map. That was a lot, wasn't it? As I said, this is kind of just more of a puzzle of making sure to clear out all the enemies in the left side of the map so you don't have to worry about them going for any of your units over there. The three in the top right hand corner are mostly fine, probably until the commander starts moving or you trigger some other units to start moving. It's just kind of just be ready for that. Otherwise, this is kind of a fun challenge to figure out, though apparently this is like majorly harder in maddening mode.
Maybe because it's only hard, because some of the video I've seen
Thank you so much.
with this is they did it on maddening, but I also assume just based upon how this
It
map
seems
functions,
we were able to expel the bandits who were hiding
it
in
ends up
Garrett
being
Mock.
very difficult either way. It wasn't horrible though.
How fortuitous that you students should gather.
Remember earlier where I've made the very big annoyance that, hey, you need movement buffs in order to do a certain map in the future? Well, that map is finally here, defending Garrett Mark. At this point, I've now upgraded to the Falcon Knight, which has a base stat movement of 8 movement. I also have the 2 movement buffs from the DLC item and the item we got from the Paralogue of Ash and Catherine earlier, meaning that I have a total movement of 10 with my class. This is the maximum amount of movement you're able to get because the Wyvern Lord has also the same amount of movement. meaning that whatever I do in this map here, where I go to the absolute stretches of my movement, means that this would be basically impossible without this movement buff. I don't know if it's actually possible without the DLC movement buff. I believe you could probably squeeze it by, especially if you get lucky enough with RNG and the church support unit, but having the additional movement from the DLC makes this slightly more workable, and let's get into why. First off, there are 4 defensive tiles that you need to worry about on this map. There is one single one on the right, which is just above where you spawn with Byleth, and then 3 just in the central left of the map itself. On turn 1, there are 2 units that will pretty much be heading straight to that first defensive tile where Byleth currently is. A shield unit will get 1 space away from it, and the Pegasus will go straight to it if Byleth is not in the way here, so you kind of have to leave Byleth over here to deal with the Pegasus Knight. And then on turn 2, you have about 3 horse cavalry units, as well as a bunch of Pegasus units, and then continuous mess over the next few turns that will go straight for the trio of defensive tiles. So on turn 2, you need to be able to successfully maneuver Byleth to the central defensive tile, otherwise you're not going to be able to win. My first attempt, I decided to leave Byleth where she spawns, which successfully gets rid of the shield unit and the Pegasus unit on the right side, and then I move Byleth over to just ahead of the defensive tiles on the left side, which of course leads to a fail because a cavalry immediately goes into the defensive tile and then stays there and wins the match. So I decided to go back to that turn, decided to move onto the far right defensive tile out of the trio, which does lead to some of the cavalry to hit me, but unfortunately one only goes to the far left, meaning that it won't go for Byleth, and then successfully wins that match. A major thing to keep in mind here is we're trying to play the AI. The AI will always try to go for the defensive tile if it's in range, but it will also look to see if it can fight someone from said defensive tile. So if you put Byleth right next to where they're going to stand, they're going to attack Byleth. And at this point, Byleth effectively one-shots everything, especially these units, because they're made to be slightly weaker, so you actually have a chance to deal with them before they jump right onto the defensive tile within the first 2 turns. Attempt 2, I decided to shift Byleth to the one tile to the left of where she starts to see if I can draw the Pegasus in my direction. I successfully draw the shield unit because it can't go straight for the defensive tile. Unfortunately, the Pegasus just goes for the defensive tile and wins the map for them, so that's not great. Then, attempt 3, I decided to move Byleth to the tile just left of the defensive tile where only a flying unit can sit, which successfully draws the attention of the Pegasus when it goes to the winning tile. Unfortunately, this causes another problem, which means the shield unit is just ahead of the defensive tile, which means that our support unit from the church will spawn on the defensive tile and never move anywhere until it gets through the shield here. But this is not something I worried too much about because I was able to go right to the middle defensive tile and deal with the mess there. Eventually though, the support unit from the church dies and hasn't moved from that spot, so a bow unit can immediately claim victory, which again is not great. Attempt 4, I decided to put Byleth just in front of this defensive tile, which means that I'll have to deal with the shield unit, getting rid of it, as well as the Pegasus unit will attack Byleth because it can't go to that defensive tile, getting rid of that too. It also means that our church support unit can start moving way out from this defensive tile, meaning that it's less likely for the units on the right side to go for this defensive tile. Anyway, on turn 2, I moved to the middle defensive tile of the trio on the left side. This takes up quite literally all the movement that I could muster, and mind you, I have a Falcon Knight which has 8 movement, and I also have 2 movement buffs, meaning that I am at the max amount of movement that I can get with DLC. This is a maneuver that I don't believe you can actually do with, well, without DLC. I don't think it's possible. I believe you have to be more reliant on the RNG of the church support unit to get through that shield unit quicker so they can move forward and get away from that defensive tile. I don't know, honestly. Unfortunately, your problems with the right side don't exactly end here because eventually this church support unit will just waltz by the bow that is currently sitting there, and the archer will eventually just not bother with going for the support unit and will instead go for the defensive tile, so you do inevitably have to work your way back here. Unfortunately, I get a little bit unlucky with one of the Pegasus and miss both my hits against it, meaning that it survives and, well, I lose again because it's either I go deal with the archer and let the Pegasus get through, or deal with the Pegasus and let the archer get through. RNG can be a bitch sometimes. Fortunately though, all this takes is just to undo my movement there, go there again, but this time rather than holding an axe because that deals more damage but has a slightly lower chance of hitting, I swapped to the sword which does less damage but has a higher chance of hitting, which means that, yeah, I do successfully kill the Pegasus this time around. I'm able to go deal with the Archer unit without needing to worry about the defensive tile. And also, the Church unit seems to be getting super lucky with the sheer amount of crits it's getting on its way downwards, so I don't have to worry about any of the enemies that go afterward. Unfortunately, the Church unit will never actually attack on their own accord, which means eventually they're going to die anyway, because when they make it to their near destination, they need to clear the Archer that's sitting there, but they will never kill the Archer, so problems are going to be there eventually. But that's not a me issue. I can start moving slowly forward with the Pegasus waves. At this point, pretty much all the enemies on the right side, aside from the Archer and the barracks, is left and gone, so you don't need to worry about that defensive tile anymore, and it's just really all about slowly moving forward and dealing with every single enemy, because in order to win on this map, you need to kill everyone. But at this point, the main challenge is done. We've successfully defended the start end of the map, and now we're just slowly moving forward to clear the rest of it.
And with that stage done, we are now running on easy mode until the final fight. Unironically. Because this and Reunion at Dawn are the two most difficult ones outside of the final battle when it comes to this challenge. And it's done. We have done it.
With the two hardest maps of part 2 done and dusted, it's time to kind of just speedrun through the rest of the game itself up until the finale. We go into Valley of Torment, we immediately take out Ash and reclaim him, persuade him to join our side, and kind of take this somewhat slowly to try and farm up levels, but it does get Judith killed because, well, I wasn't exactly being too wise about her positioning, so I kind of undo some things and just clear the commander and end the map anyway. Next we have the Great Bridge. Again, nothing too special here. We clear out the bottom right side, deal with the surprise attack there, go up to the top left side, then deal with the surprise attack from Lorenz here, and then take out the commander, making this a pretty easy map to deal with. I just avoided the demonic beast because I just couldn't care less about dealing with them at this point. I'm so far ahead in levels that I'm mostly fine to just bum rush through here because I can get my levels through the free time things by just standing around, letting all the swordsmen just whack me like 5 million times until I decide to kill them all. Taking Fort Mercius, a very quick one again. We just mostly bum rush Death Knight. He starts running away, we take him out, and it's all done and dusted here. Probably the only thing I'd say be wary of is assassins. They can be problematic, especially if you're playing this on Maddening. Otherwise, it's kind of a walk in the park. Next, we have the N-Bar Infiltration. Again, another easy map. This one we take a little bit slowly just because the sheer amount of enemies there are to deal with, but eventually we take down the Death Knight, and then I get in range of Hubert where he decides to launch a meteorite at us, which is where the challenge at the beginning says, "Ha, you thought you couldn't be touched," and insta-kills Hubert. This is probably the point where I say, yeah, maybe the chalice of the beginnings can be somewhat cheesy. I don't know. I still love the thing regardless. We're then now at N-Bar Castle, where I kind of bum rush to the throne room itself. I believe I actually use a door key that's just in my inventory from one of the previous maps to get in there quicker. Then bide my time with the enemies in the corner for a little bit, just until I feel like I'm ready to take a shot at Edelgard. I walk up there with the killing edge, land a double crit, and nuke her ass. We then jump into Shambhala, where I get to Thalos and kill him within 4 minutes of starting it, ignoring all the dialogue. I really wasn't joking when I said outside of the first 2 chapters and the finale, part 2 in this challenge is quite literally a cakewalk. I just did all of the above, so everything from after defending the monastery before and up to the finale. I did that in 3 hours, live. Like, it wasn't that hard. With Byleth being at the level she is, she one-shots anything that comes across her. Occasionally you might get unlucky with a crit or 2, but most of the time they either have a lower chance of hitting or they don't do much damage. It's kind of just very easy to deal with at this point. But, and speaking of which, we now roll into the final challenge of the challenge, the finale. But first, the most important question of all this, who did I choose to romance by the end of this game? I romanced Sophis because I think there's nothing funnier than solo Byleth continuing to be the solo one-woman army and not going for anyone ever. Also because I failed to get any other supports up high enough to even consider that, but that's not why I considered that problem. So let's go over why the finale can actually be a difficult challenge. It's not hard like the first 2 missions of part 2 were, it's more so timing restrictions. Because unlike previous Fire Emblem games where you had like a pretty high turn limit of like 999 or something stupid along those lines, you only have a turn limit of 99 turns. If you haven't beaten the map by turn 99, the game will auto-fail. So that means this map has a timer on it, and trust me when I say this, you will get damn close to hitting that timer's limit, because here's the thing, whenever you go against Rhea, you'll only ever do somewhere between 5 to 7 damage depending on the weapon you're using. This means, just by default, to take out Rhea entirely will take you somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 50 turns alone. But before you can even do that, you must take the time to clear out effectively everything else on the map aside from the 2 golems in the top half of the map because they can't reach you. Because you need to clear out all the white dragons in order to make Rhea somewhat tolerable in the first place, and B, just clearing out all the other units makes it so you don't have to worry about them coming in and whacking you when you're low on health after grunting a bunch of damage from Rhea. Ultimately, it's just a very time-consuming thing. You have only a small amount of turns that you can clear out the rest of the map because you need most of your turns to fight Rhea. Let's start with clearing out the map stage. So first off, I go down directly to the bottom and clear out everything on the bottom. It takes a little bit of time because I have to be patient and do it wisely, otherwise I could just get Byleth killed just haphazardly. Then we go up the right side and clear out everything on that side, and then head over to the left side and repeat the process there. By the time I'd finally cleared out all the unit mess and was ready to take on Rhea and Rhea alone, it was already turn 44. It's not too much of a challenge to clear out the map, it's just time consuming. The challenge in and of itself is doing it in a lowest amount of turns you can so you have as much breathing room as possible for Rhea. Being in turn 44, I believe I would be fine because, I've still got 54 turns to roll through to kill Rhea, and yes, it might be a squeeze if I forget certain things, which we'll get to in a moment, but that's more than enough time to clear out all of her health. Let me tell you the process of how this works. So you go to the outer edge of her range and you go straight in, whack her for 2 hits, and then go halfway through her range. Then deal with an AoE attack to the face that may or may not miss. Then you go back in your next turn to whack her again, and then move out of her range entirely. Again, this makes use of my max movement that I have from my 2 movement buffs and now being on a Wyvern Lord. It's at this point where you monitor your health. Are you high enough in health that you could probably brunt another hit to the face from Rhea as well as the AoE attack, or do you use an elixir use to heal back to full before you go in again? Basically, it's more of a question, do you burn a turn to heal, or do you think you got enough health to brunt some more damage because you were lucky enough to dodge enough of the damage previously, and rinse and repeat. It's at this point where we're finally 87 turns in. I am down to Rhea's final health bar, which is 160 something health, which is a lot of health to run through, and I unfortunately take a hit from the AoE damage, forcing me to fall back outside of my usual pattern loop to take a heal. Things are pretty stretched at this point. I've got a lot of health to run through and just over 10 turns to actually do it. This is where I get reminded by someone in my stream chat that, hey, by the way, Thunderbrand exists that does 4 hits, even though it's not more damage per hit, it's 2 additional hits per turn, which is where I also remind you, keep in mind, Brave Swords and the Thunderbrand is super useful against Rhea here and gives you a lot more breathing room because instead of doing 2 hits, they do 4 hits. They don't do extra damage, maybe they do slightly less damage, but getting more hits in for that damage is so much more useful than the single 2 hit shots that I've been doing with a silver sword for most of this. It's also this point with a reminder from chat that I swap off of having the Chalice of Beginnings as my held item, because at this point it's not exactly useful to have. We're not worrying about having counter attacks or not. We need some form of stat boost to make this a little bit easier, whether it be more likely to dodge the hit. Instead of having a 63 chance to be hit by Rhea, we take a 53% chance to get hit by Rhea, which means we have to spend less turns on healing. But basically it's at this point where you kind of have to shuffle your items around, make sure you have a bunch of brave weapons, have Catherine's Thunderbrand being completely unused for the rest of for any part else before here, as well as swapping to a better held item that gives you better odds, higher chances of dodging hits in general, and so on and so forth. Eventually, we finally complete it.
You missed again. I cannot believe I forgot about the Thunderbrand. Oh. Oh. Oh.
Oh. Oh. I just completely forgot that those things existed because I just wasn't making use of them because they're useless throughout the rest of the run. But no, this is like the one place where the Thunderbrand is so useful because it's 4 hits instead of 2. Oh. Ah.
Rhea, please!
Let's see, how many turns did everything take? 7 turns for a skirmish at dawn, 21. So when the others notice Byleth's ring, do you think she doesn't answer truthfully if she married a god as to whom is herself? I do wonder the question on that one. I guess we'll never know. Sold it right, rebirth. Yeah, because that was very quick. You just destroy the Death Knight and go straight for the end. 36, 17, 28, 15, 13, 28, 20. Ah, it's parallels there. Wow. Most of the chapter 2 part 2 maps we seem to have just purged through with very little turns. And then there's the final battle. Because it's like part 1, you actually spend a lot more turns doing things. Part 2, aside from breaking Dawn and then defending the reunion at Dawn and defending Garrick Mark, you don't really spend too many turns splitzing through those levels. And then you spend almost 100 turns on the final battle because that's just how it goes. And there we have it. That's the full run. It's done. It was genuinely a really, really fun challenge run to do, and I did do it in hard difficulty. I don't have the balls to try it in maddening, especially considering I've never done a proper Fire Emblem run in maddening either, so that is a question for another time whether I'll even consider giving that a go, though from what I can tell, it's probably going to be hell. If you do want to see the challenge run in full, incomplete, there is a link to the playlist down below that contains every single VOD for this entire challenge run if you want to see what actually happened in full detail rather than this cut down commentary of it here in this video here. And also this was streamed live on my Twitch account and my second channel. If you want to check out me doing these challenge runs live, go check out those things linked in the description down below. These take like a month and a bit to pull these videos together and eventually release them for you here on this channel, so maybe check those out. If not, thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy this, make sure to leave a like down below, and hey, maybe subscribe. We're going in a new direction for this channel, so that number's probably going to be hemorrhaging a bit. But hey, thank you so much for coming out, and until next time, guys, bye-bye.